In the last video, we chatted in depth about commodities exchanges, financial derivatives, and how they might help promote more efficient markets. Today, we're going to talk specifically about the C price or the KC future contract, how it works, how it's utilized, and some curiosities or anomalies that may cast doubt on how efficient it really makes the physical coffee market. So in the last video, we clarified that the C price is actually the price of a coffee futures contract, not physical coffee, but a contract to buy or sell physical coffee of a certain grade with certain terms at a certain date in the future. And this is not just for any coffee. The C price applies to mild arabica coffee. In the words of the ICE, the exchange where the KC contract is traded, this is how they define the product that it applies to. A lot of coffee C shall consist of 37,500 pounds of washed arabica coffee, in sound condition, free from all unwashed and aged flavors in the cup. We're talking only about arabica coffee, and we're talking only about washed coffee. This is important because this is only one of several types of coffee that are out there. So out of all traded coffee, we have arabica and robusta. I know that there are other varieties that exist, but arabica and robusta are the ones that are normally traded internationally. But within arabica, we have mild arabica, which are normally of washed process, and we have hard arabica, which are normally a natural process or some variation, and the majority of these come from Brazil. Then we have robusta, which I'm sure has many different classifications also, but for the purpose of trading, all robusta coffee is tenderable against the RC contract. One thing that's important to note is that Brazilian coffee was not tenderable against the KC contract until the March 2013 expiration of the KC contract. It's important to note that over time, the production of non-mild coffees has increased quite a lot. In fact, it's more than doubled, while the global production of mild arabica coffee, which is tenderable against the KC contract, has remained relatively constant and even has fallen a little bit. So we can see from our graph here that mild arabica coffee used to represent more than half of the total coffee in the world, whereas today it represents about 1/3. So let's try to compare the traded price of mild arabica coffee versus the C price from 1990 to 2022. Now these are nominal prices, so they've not been deflated or changed in any way. This is the actual amount of currency that we're talking about. So here we can see at the beginning of our series, from about 1990 up until about 2008, give or take, the traded price of mild arabica coffee and the C price were very close to one another. Now after this period, from about 2009 until today, the difference between the price of mild arabica coffee physically and the C price of the mild arabica coffee contract have drifted further apart from one another. Now this is problematic because in the last video, when we talked about the idea of market efficiency, the price of a future contract, which is based on a commodities exchange, is only valid and theoretically representative of physical equilibrium when physical traders have the option to trade via the terminal market in order to eliminate this difference or arbitrage. We see that from about 2009 on, this hasn't happened as much. Just going to the exchange to sell coffee has become a less attractive option because it's always at a discount. So if you're selling mild arabica coffee somewhere outside of the exchange and someone offers you a low price, a price that's below the average spot price that you can get somewhere else, you don't necessarily have the option of going to the exchange because you're guaranteed to have to sell for a discount if you do so. And in fact, very little mild arabica coffee is tendered against the KC contract. Last year in 2022, only 1.8% of the traded volume of mild arabica coffee was bought and sold through the exchange. So this situation is a bit troubling. Let's take another look a bit deeper. Let's have a look at the correlation between the C price and the actual traded price of mild coffee versus non-mild coffee at different periods from 1995 to 2022. So we can see that in the first period from 1995 to 2003, our correlation coefficient between the C price and the mild price is 0.98. So it's about 98% correlated. Whereas the correlation coefficient between non-mild coffee, which is not tenderable, and the C price is 0.91. In the second period, from 2004 to 2013, we can see that the correlation of milds to C price has gone down a bit, and that of non-milds to C price has gone up a bit. And finally, by the last period, from 2024 to 2022, the most recent, we can see that the correlation between the C price and the traded coffee price is even higher for non-mild coffee than it is for mild coffee. This is quite strange because non-mild coffee cannot even be tendered against the contract. This suggests that the C price may no longer follow the notion of physical equilibrium between the supply and demand of mild coffee, the one that's actually tenderable against the contract, rather has veered closer to reflect the supply and demand conditions of non-mild coffee that's not even tenderable. Let's talk briefly about the idea of speculation, because we know, as we talked about last video, at the ICE Commodities Exchange, it's not only traders, it's not only buyers and sellers that are participating in this market through financial derivatives, but speculators also. Speculation, of course, is taking risk for money. And there are some arguments that this is quite important and positive for an exchange. The idea is that with more liquidity or more buying and selling activity going on, there will be faster adjustment of the price. The question is, toward what? Theoretically, if this market is efficient, if it's effective as a terminal market, and arbitrage opportunities between the physical and the future market are always eliminated quickly, then more liquidity will lead to a faster adjustment toward the physical equilibrium indicator price, which again prevents physical coffee shortages or surpluses. But if that's not the case, more speculation and liquidity will simply amplify the effects of market distortions. Why else do we want more liquidity in a futures market? Well, one reason, in addition to faster price adjustments, using more of the available information out in the world about the current and future supply for and demand of physical coffee. If there's more liquidity in the market, people looking to open a position will be able to find a partner faster, because if you remember from our discussion before, if you want to open a long position, you need someone to take the other side with a short position and vice versa. So the more buying and selling going on, the more quickly we will be able to execute trades. On the other side, there's also a lot of discussion of whether speculation can affect the price, can affect movement of the price itself in addition, and cause it to move away from the physical equilibrium, perfect price, where all supply and demand is cancelled out. And in order to evaluate this possibility, we need to consider the weight of money hypothesis. So I don't know if this would really qualify as a hypothesis, but basically the concept is that the price of a futures contract is based on the supply of and demand for futures contracts. Now, this should correspond to the supply of and demand for physical coffee if futures contracts convert into physical coffee. So if the changes in the ratio of supply and demand for futures contracts corresponds perfectly to the supply and demand for physical coffee, then there's no problem. But what if it doesn't? We've already talked about the strained relationship between the terminal market and the physical market for coffee itself, which we noticed based on the falling correlation between the C price and the physical milds price, and the rising correlation between the C price and the non-milds price, showing that it may be beginning to reflect coffee that's not even tenderable there, and whose supply and demand levels fluctuate independently of those of mild coffee because they're different products, they're grown under different conditions in different countries, and they have very different costs of production. Back to the futures market. So the idea is dominoes. That the first domino are traders. There are traders and hedgers. Traders are buying and selling physical coffee. Hedgers, who intend to trade physical coffee in the future, are protecting themselves from price fluctuations, and they're only protecting the physical volume that they actually intend to buy or sell. So this is the beginning. Then we have another class called fundamental speculators. So these are speculators who are intending to take risk and make a profit. And they're predicting where they think the price is going to go based on the physical supply and demand conditions. So if the traders and the hedgers are operating rationally based on the physical coffee they intend to buy and sell, and fundamental speculators are placing bets based on the same physical market, then this activity should amplify pro-equilibrium movement. But if, hypothetically, folks have realized that the C price is moving more based on hard arabica coffee, which is not tenderable, and are hedging their hard arabica intention to buy or sell based on those fundamentals, then this could begin to create market movements that would be solidified by fundamental speculators and lead the market in that direction. Because, and I forgot to mention this before, the ICE exchange does not have a contract for hard arabica coffee. I believe there is one on the exchange in Sao Paulo, but I don't believe it's very widely used or effective as a hedge in the international markets. I could be wrong about that. I don't know much about it. So back to speculation. We have a third class, and these are technical speculators. And these are folks who are not buying and selling coffee. They're not protecting themselves from volatility, and they're not even really looking at the future physical supply and demand. They're making bets, not based on what they actually think is going to happen in the physical market, in the real world, but simply based on technical analysis. So looking at the little lines, using algorithms and all kinds of quantitative tools to place these bets, looking to make a profit simply based on their analysis of past to predict the future. All of this speculative behavior, again, could solidify price fluctuation toward equilibrium, but if the big dominoes at the end are based on a small domino, that is the trading and hedging activity, that is not based on the physical equilibrium of supply and demand of the tenderable product, well then we're simply creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. And this is quite feasible and possible only when there is not an effective terminal market to bring the futures price back to the physical reality. There have also been many analyses done on the idea of herding and different speculator behaviors that amplify the volatility of markets. Some have concluded that speculation moves the market completely in a way that does not promote equilibrium. Others have concluded that speculation solidifies equilibrium. Some have concluded that increased speculation amplifies and increases volatility based on excessive reaction to news. While there are even others who say that increased speculation decreases volatility of the market. There's a lot of very complex econometrics that I think even fewer people understand than those who understand financial derivatives very well. And all of these things come down to how these tests are set up and what kind of models are used. So I don't have a really clear answer on anything like this, but I think what's most important to keep in mind is that because the futures price is based on the supply of and demand for futures contracts, speculators who do buy and sell futures contracts do therefore have the ability to influence the price based on their actions. So I think there's no question as to whether speculative activity can move prices away from physical equilibrium. The only question is, have they? That's so far not clear and is a big part of what I'm working on currently. So as we discussed, it's well known that there is a strong connection between the C price and the price that's being paid for physical green coffee. Whether or not this is anywhere close to some theoretical equilibrium price, if that's a thing that even exists. And there's quite a lot of talk about how certain factors are going to be affecting the C price into the future because there's been a 5% drop in stock levels of ICE certified coffee. Again, only 1.8% of physical coffee traded, of my arabica only, has been traded through the exchange last year. But anyway, there are these kind of events, or some kind of report that, look, it's been raining a little bit less than last year at this time in Brazil so far, so look out, there's going to be a bad harvest, and then look what happens with the price. And every time there's a price movement, I see these articles in Reuters and Bloomberg and the tweets of some folks who consider themselves to be the market experts that, okay, the prices changed by 20 cents, and that is because of rainfall in Brazil so far, or because flowering has been delayed by 3 weeks, and that means something or something else. But of course, no one has any way of actually attributing these kind of things to whatever fluctuation they might have seen. So let's take a look at the idea of these shocks, the theoretical cause and effect based on an efficient market, and what kind of a situation could exist if we did not have an efficient market. But we do have a very strong consensus that the C price is the market price and should be used as the price for physical coffee. So in an ideal efficient market theoretical situation, we have an event or news that has some bearing on the current or future supply of or demand for coffee. This event creates a change in the physical supply and demand. Then physical traders act accordingly, offering less or more, buying less or more, or hedging against the transactions that they plan to carry out in the future based on their adjusted level of supply or demand. When they take this action based on physical fundamentals, the price changes and speculators then react and the derivative price catches up to the physical market. But let's say this is reversed, that it's not the physical market that causes the future price. It's not the future price that predicts necessarily the future physical price, but the future price which determines the future physical price because of this consensus that there needs to be this very close connection. So in such a case, there could be some news or some event. Speculators see this and react. The price changes based on the bets that they're placing. And because of the need for this strong connection between physical price and the futures price, physical traders hedge based on this change in the futures price and obey. And when physical traders are hedging based on this, well, then they have to buy and sell based on this, or else the hedges will be ineffective. And when this happens, the futures price actually dictates the physical price. Then the physical supply and demand must adjust themselves based on this price. So in this kind of a situation, it's still just as useful to try to predict what's going to happen with the futures price, because it has everything to do with the price of that you're going to buy and sell for. And if this is the case, trying to predict the C price is really predicting the speculator's behavior. You can do that, and it may be a necessary exercise, but we shouldn't convince ourselves that it's the same thing as predicting the physical equilibrium. So is the futures contract price, the C price, predicting the future equilibrium price? Or is it informing the future physical price? A high correlation between the futures price and the physical price could mean either one, even though this correlation is often cited in order to indicate that the futures market is efficient. One point that I think is really important to keep in mind is that if we don't have this connection, then the futures contract is not useful as a hedge. So in order for hedging using the futures contract and as well as options to occur, the physical price must correspond to it. So if there is a strong consensus that the physical coffee price should be based on the futures price because of the need to hedge, and no strong link between the futures exchange and the physical market because of how little arabica coffee is tendered there, probably because it's always at a discount, then there's nothing to tether it to the equilibrium of physical supply and demand. When that's the case, the only thing that's left is predicting trader sentiment. Susan Newman, in a paper I found quite important that I'll link in the description here, proposed this idea, and it's the first time I had heard of it, of predicting versus informing. She says that the C price informs the physical price because all of the buyers decide that it's the price that they're going to pay. Not all of them, but enough of them understand that they share a need for coffee to be priced this way, such that it eliminates alternatives and everybody ends up doing it this way, and this is how the C price becomes the market price. In this case, the causation is reversed, that futures, which are supposed to predict physical, start to inform physical. And this process is legitimized by consensus. I think this is normally referred to as the tail wagging the dog. So before we end this one and move on to differentials, I want to share a little bit more evidence against the C price being indicative of physical equilibrium. All I have is this kind of cursory evidence right now because this is, as I mentioned, what I'm working on currently, so I hope to have actual results to share in the next few months. But for now, at the beginning of this analysis, I just looked at historical figures that are available to get a sense of kind of in broad strokes how the supply of and demand for mild Arabica has changed over the years in reference to its price. So I constructed this time series data set, monthly price and quantity data from 1990 until 2022. And I took the average of the first 24 months and the average of the last 24 months and compared these to see basically how this has changed over time. I didn't take the first month versus the last month because there's quite a lot of volatility, but because the series is so long that I think first 24 and last 24 is a good indication of basically where it started and where it finished. So for the C price, we have an increase of 96%. However, in real terms, that's equivalent to a decrease of 10%, again, because the average cost of other things has risen so much, more so than coffee. The ICO milds indicator price, that's the average of the Colombian milds and other milds. This has increased by 141%, but in real terms, it's decreased by 14%. And while the C price, which corresponds to mild Arabica coffee, has declined by 10%, the production of mild coffee has also decreased, only by 2%, but it's something. Now, if the C price is representative of equilibrium, the only way that's possible is if the demand for mild arabica coffee has also decreased, necessitating a price decrease of 10% even when supplies fall. Now, this seems kind of far-fetched because in the time from 1990 until now, it's highly unlikely that the total demand for mild arabica coffee has decreased. Well, the population of the world has increased quite a lot, the total income of all the people around the world has increased quite a lot, and importantly, specialty coffee has become a thing. It has grown from something very small to something that represents a large part of the market, and most specialty coffee is mild arabica. So this right here, I wouldn't say this is proof that there's something fishy going on with the C price, but to me, it's definitely evidence that we need to take a closer and deeper look. Also telling is that while the production of mild arabica has decreased, the production of non-mild coffee has more than doubled. I often hear traders trying to justify the fall in the C price based on an oversupply of coffee. And I think that does make some sense if we're talking about non-mild coffee, but of course this is coffee that cannot even be traded against the KC contracts. So then an oversupply of one thing should only cause the price of another thing to fall, or all other things held constant, if those two things are substitutable for one another. But again, I find that highly unlikely because, specialty coffee exists and is quite big now. So I'll leave you with this paradox to think about until I come back with more interesting data, hopefully in the next couple of months. And we'll pick up next time talking about differentials, because of course no one is selling exactly for the C price, because very little coffee corresponds precisely to that indicated by the C contract. Rather, it's traded based on differentials in reference to the C contract, or in reference to whatever they want. So hopefully this answered some questions for you. So if that's the case, feel free to leave them in the comments here and I'll try to answer you in the comments or cover them in another video later on. See you next time.